Hey everybody, it's Y Litecoin here. I decided I wanted to make an educational series around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency markets in general, really because the casino market that's developed has led people astray. I mean, this casino market has only gotten bigger over the last 8, 9 years. Most have lost touch with the original value proposition of Bitcoin, and I want to restore that understanding. I've tried various ways of doing this over the years, but I've never really given a comprehensive and simplistic overview. So here's to that. I'll be breaking down some of the biggest misconceptions about Bitcoin in general that have developed out of this number go up mentality, which really has been prioritized over everything else. So, in order to do that, we have to start from the beginning with the value proposition of Bitcoin. Most people think that Bitcoin's value comes from being scarce. Everyone talks about 21 million supply, being digital gold, but that's not where Bitcoin's value comes from. Scarcity means almost nothing, really nothing, if the thing that's scarce isn't actually demanded or isn't actually useful. So the real value proposition of Bitcoin is very simple. It has the potential to resist the state's monetary monopoly. The state is able to extract tax and enforce censorship from two ways, right? The state extracts tax by giving the Fed, the central bank, exclusive authority over money creation, meaning it can print, for example, a $100 bill for like 5 cents and then sell it at face value at 100 bucks. That's really where the inflation tax comes from. And then the government can enact legislation to control how and where you spend money. That's where censorship comes from. And so Bitcoin, if individuals are actually willing to use it, can overcome both this inflation tax and the censorship. That's it. That's the entire value proposition of Bitcoin. It's not gold 2.0. It's not a speculative magic rock. Bitcoin's purpose is to let people settle value, settle trade without needing permission. Um, so what does censorship resistance actually mean? Really, it means you can send value to anyone, anywhere without a bank, government, or intermediary telling you no. It means nobody can freeze your assets, nobody can block your transaction, and no central authority can stop you from participating in the economy. Right? So how does Bitcoin do this? Bitcoin's design solved a real problem. Before Bitcoin, many tried building digital money, and all failed for really the same reason: centralization. If a company or a server keeps a ledger, it can be shut down or compromised. And without a trusted third party, digital value could be spent more than once. So Bitcoin solved both these hard problems at the same time by combining proof of work mining with a public distributed ledger. It introduced a system of decentralized consensus. The entire network could now agree on a single version of transaction history without trusting anyone in particular. This eliminated the double spending problem and for the first time made trustless global digital settlement possible. So the breakthrough wasn't just 21 million coins. It was proving that value can be secured by a global, decentralized network of individuals owned by no one and controlled by nobody. But if we're achieving decentralized consensus, we need to know what we're actually agreeing on, right? Many assume Bitcoin is de facto trustless, but it's like an opt-in system in which all the rules are known and verifiable. But we need to actually know the rules first. Right? There are many components to these consensus rules, and to keep the video short, we'll just discuss a few. If you want further information for a deeper understanding, these are all contained in my book that I'm currently having edited titled Why Everyone's Wrong About Bitcoin. So let's review a few of them. Bitcoin's 21 million supply cap isn't enforced by magic, it's enforced by math. So the way it does this is that every 10 minutes, a new block is supposed to be mined. But as new hash rate is added, Bitcoin automatically adjusts the difficulty every 2 weeks to keep that price steady. That's the difficulty adjustment algorithm. This ensures that new coins are released on schedule and the halving events happen every 4 years. Without this adjustment, miners could flood the network and inflate the supply. So the difficulty adjustment algorithm keeps the issuance predictable, making Bitcoin scarcity real. The next rule we'll talk about is the block size limit. This controls how much transaction data can fit into each block. Originally, blocks were limited to 1 megabyte to prevent spam, keep the cost of validation low, and keep the network decentralized. So this means that Bitcoin can only process about 7 transactions per second. And as demand grows, fees inevitably rise because users are now forced to compete for limited block space. Raising the block size originally sounded like a realistic solution, but bigger blocks increase the cost of validation, which means it increases the cost of running a node, which then prices out people. And that becomes a real threat to the existence of Bitcoin long term. So it's the block size limit's a deliberate trade-off, keeping Bitcoin decentralized and censorship resistant by keeping the cost of running the node down, even if it limits its potential, long-term price. These rules that we just talked about, they're not enforced by law, and this is the important piece here to remember. They're enforced by users, by you. Specifically, the way this works is by individuals rejecting invalid blocks if you actually run a node and accept Bitcoin. So, number one, the only nodes that matter are the ones that are participating, right? The ones that are actually economic, receiving Bitcoin as payment for goods and services that they deliver. And you are only really enforcing consensus when you reject an invalid block or transaction. So that's what makes you participate in this distributed consensus protocol. It's based not on authority, but on logic, history, and this economic finality. So if enough people run full nodes with this logic in mind, that means that nobody, not a miner, government, or billionaire, can change the rules of the system unilaterally. That's what makes Bitcoin's settlement be referred to as trustless, because the rules are known, verifiable, and enforced by thousands of independent actors. Right? It's a totally opt-in system where the rules are all known in advance, and every individual on the network, has his own self-interest to enforce those rules. So now that we understand a couple of the rules, how they're enforced, how Bitcoin achieves this decentralized consensus, what does this look like in the real world? I think the next logical place to go is that what emerges out of this is a market for confirmations. So Bitcoin really is a service. That service is confirmation finality, settlement finality, and inevitably you get this market for confirmations that emerges. So that would be the mechanism by which users pay miners to prioritize and secure their transactions. The higher the fee, the faster your transaction is included. The more confirmations you wait for, the more confident you are that the payment is final and irreversible. The system works because miners are economically incentivized to maximize their profits, so they'll organize transactions by the highest fee or highest bidder, and merchants are incentivized to delay fulfillment until settlement risk is low. So you have this natural market between merchants and miners, right? Merchants want to get their money secure. They pay for miners for that security, and miners want the highest profit, so they organize transactions in a block by the merchants paying the highest fee. You can think of this market like really any other market you're familiar with, except the trade happening is Bitcoin to the miner in the form of fees, and in return they get confirmation, which leads to settlement. So let's summarize these topics we just discussed, because there's quite a bit. So Bitcoin's value prop really is simple. It's to resist the state's monopoly over money, and that specifically means resisting censorship and inflation tax that's imposed through state money. And it is possible to do this because Bitcoin solved these hard problems of achieving decentralized consensus. The architecture makes it possible only if individuals are actually willing to use the technology for its purpose, meaning they opt into the system and actually defend the network if it's not permitted. What this also implies, and this is the last point we were making, that if demand for Bitcoin is high enough, it will inevitably lead to fee pressure rising, which, if you take the logic further out, leads to a monetization limit or a max price point for a single Bitcoin chain, which we'll discuss in more depth in a separate video. So to conclude this short talk, what actually is Bitcoin? Bitcoin isn't number go up. It's not a retirement plan, not a financial product. It's an opt-in voluntary monetary system that potentially can be censorship and inflation resistant. Understanding this, not the hype, is the key to seeing what comes next. It's not about replacing all money. It's about giving people an alternative to state control. That's exactly why Bitcoin matters. For more in-depth analysis, my book, Why Everyone's Wrong About Bitcoin, will be available soon. Meanwhile, join the live streams and subscribe to my YouTube channel at the Litecoin Forecast. or you can follow me on X at WLitecoin. Thanks, and stay tuned for the next video.